Hey everyone, welcome to another deep dive. Today we're going deep on Florentino Perez. You probably know him as the president of Real Madrid, the guy behind those incredible Galacticos teams. But we're going way beyond football today, folks. We're going to uncover the man behind the Real Madrid image. Our guide for this deep dive is Fonsi Loaiza and his book, Florentino Pérez, El Poder del Palco.
That's the powers of the box seat in English.
Exactly. And let me tell you, this book dives into the nitty-gritty of Perez's life, his journey to the top, and, the controversies that have followed him around. So what's in store for us today? Well, Loaiza doesn't hold back. He digs into Perez's early years, his business dealings, his relationship with the media. It's a story of ambition, power, and the strategies some people use to climb that ladder. Ready to jump in?
Let's do it.
Okay, so Loaiza throws us a curveball right from the start. We don't meet Florentino Perez as a football hotshot, not at all. This guy cut his teeth as a bureaucrat during Franco's regime back in the 70s. And get this, his mentors. Deeply rooted in that system. Not exactly your average start for a global sports icon, huh?
Right. It's really a unique window into how power structures can stick around, even when huge political shifts are happening. Perez's experiences in those early years in Franco's Spain, they must have really shaped how he sees the world, how to navigate these complex systems, often ones that are pretty opaque.
Like a masterclass in real politics before it was cool, right? But hold on, there's more. Perez decides to give politics a shot himself in the 80s, becomes Secretary General of a centrist party called PRD. Yep, that's the one. And Loaiza argues that this stint in politics, even though it didn't pan out in the end, it gave Perez some really valuable experience, taught him how to actually wield influence. And here's where Loaiza throws in a story that I just find fascinating. Perez and some others, they start a magazine, Guia del Ocio, all about leisure and culture. Harmless, right?
Sounds pretty tame.
Right. Well, then they go and publish a section called, get this, Madrid Erotico, the fine they got slapped with. Oh, boy.
Wow, Madrid Erotico. Talk about a shift. What strikes me about this whole thing isn't even the controversy itself. It's what it shows about how Perez operates. This is a man who pushes boundaries, tests the limits, isn't afraid of a little or maybe a lot of controversy. That willingness to take risks might explain some of the moves he makes later on in his career,
Totally. It's like a sneak peek at the Florentino we know now, but just like a smaller scale. Pushing boundaries, playing the game a bit differently, that seems to be a pattern with him. So after politics didn't quite work out, Perez sets his sights on a new arena.
Construction.
Quite
a change.
Right. But he ends up becoming the president of ACS, a huge construction company. And Loaiza makes it very clear this is not just your average career move. Loaiza claims that Perez took those connections he'd made back in his PRD days and used them. We're talking about some seriously lucrative construction contracts. It's like he took his political playbook and just applied it to a whole different game.
That's when Loaiza starts to ask the tough questions about, well, how power really works, especially behind the scenes. Did Perez use those connections to get an unfair advantage? It's a question that hangs over a lot of his early business dealings, especially this company called Construcciones Padrós.
Yes, Construcciones Padrós. This is where it gets really interesting. Loaiza goes into detail about how Perez managed to acquire this construction company and the price he paid. Shockingly low, especially considering the previous owners were going through some rough times. Then, to top it off, the government ends up covering the worker compensation. Pure luck. Or was it something more? Loaiza definitely seems to think it's the latter.
This incident really highlights that murky area where cronyism can flourish, those blurred lines between business and politics. And as Loaiza keeps pointing out, it's a recurring theme in Perez's story.
Yeah, it makes you wonder what else went on behind closed doors. And this leads us to, of course, Perez's most well-known role, the one that made him a household name, at least in the football world, the president of Real Madrid. He takes over in 2000, and while everyone remembers the Galacticos era, all those incredible players, Loaiza wants us to look past the glamour. He wants us to see the business strategy, the political maneuvering that Perez brought to Real Madrid.
What Loaiza does so effectively is draw a straight line between how Perez operated in business and how he approached football. This wasn't just about building a team that could win trophies. It was about turning Real Madrid into a financial powerhouse, getting those big deals, and really cementing his control over the club.
And the perfect example of this, probably the most controversial thing Perez did, was the rezoning of Real Madrid's training ground during his time as president. Prime real estate, right? And guess what? The rezoning, which, by the way, happened to occur when Aznar was in office, allowed for those skyscrapers to be built, bringing in tons of profit for the club.
That whole episode at the training ground really sums up Loaiza's main argument. He's suggesting that Perez's success isn't just about being a savvy businessman, though he certainly is that. It's about understanding power, knowing exactly how to use it, even if it means bending the rules, maybe even crossing some ethical lines.
It's a bold statement to make. And it leads us to what might be the most concerning part of Perez's story, how he deals with the media. Loaiza does not hold back here, accusing Perez of using his power to control what people hear and read, to silence anyone who dares to criticize him. Buckle up, because things are about to get really interesting. Loaiza paints this picture of Perez as a guy who really gets the power of image, of making sure people hear what he wants them to hear. He even accuses Perez of, building these relationships with certain journalists, giving them special access to Real Madrid.
Classic access journalism, right?
Yeah.
You scratch my back, I'll scratch yours.
Exactly. But it's more than just, getting good press. Loaiza claims that Perez actively worked to shut down journalists, anyone who dared to criticize him or dig into his business dealings. Kind of chilling when you think about it. That kind of control over information, being able to silence people you don't agree with, that's scary stuff.
It really makes you wonder, are there other stories out there that we'll never hear?
Right. And Loaiza gives this example, talks about this Spanish journalist who, after publishing some articles that were critical of Perez's businesses, suddenly found his career hitting some major roadblocks.
Makes you think twice about speaking truth to power, right? Especially when you're dealing with someone like Perez. It raises all sorts of questions about whether journalists can really do their job, whether they can be truly independent when there's that much pressure.
It's a lot to take in for sure. We've gone from Franco's Spain to the highest levels of professional football. And through it all, you see this same drive for power, the lengths people will go to hold on to it.
Absolutely. And you can't forget, this isn't just ancient history, some story about a guy from a different era. The systems that Perez learned to navigate, those dynamics of power and influence, they're still at play today.
And Loaiza doesn't shy away from that. He even gets into some legal issues involving Perez's companies. Cases that, well, let's just say they seem to have been resolved a little too conveniently in Perez's favor. It's like Loaiza suggesting that Perez's influence might go even further than we thought.
Right. There are these specific legal proceedings Loaiza points to involving Perez's companies. The outcomes raised eyebrows, to say the least. Now, Loaiza doesn't have concrete proof of any wrongdoing, but he definitely makes you wonder if maybe, just maybe, Perez used his connections to make things go his way.
Starting to feel like we're in a movie plot, right? All these whispers and shadows. Makes you wonder what else we're not seeing, what's happening behind the scenes. Maybe we should take a step back, look at the bigger picture. We started with Perez's early days in Franco's Spain, talked about his time in politics, his rise in the construction world, his controversial reign at Real Madrid, and now this complicated and kind of unsettling relationship he has with the media.
It's a lot, and what ties it all together, what runs through Perez's entire story, is this theme of power, how to get it, how to use it, and most importantly, how to keep it. Loaiza presents Perez's life almost like, a handbook for navigating the world of power, but at the same time, he makes us think about the ethics of it all. What lines is Perez willing to cross?
It's like Loaiza is holding up a mirror, showing us this intersection of money, politics, influence. And he's asking us, are you okay with this? Is this how you want things to work? Because let's be real. Florentino Pérez, his story isn't unique. These patterns of influence, the way people consolidate power, these tactics, they happen everywhere. Loaiza wants us to see those patterns, to understand them, so we can start asking the right questions about the people in charge, the ones calling the shots. As we wrap up this deep dive into Florentino Pérez, I've got to say we have more questions than we started with, which honestly I think is exactly what Loaiza wanted. He's given us a peek behind the curtain, a glimpse at the man behind the Real Madrid mask. And it's complicated, controversial, and maybe a little uncomfortable.
It's on us now. Loaiza's given us the information, but it's our job to wrestle with it. We have to think about these issues, keep asking questions, demanding more transparency from those in power, whether it's in football, in business, in government, doesn't matter. We all have a role to play in holding the powerful accountable.
And let's not forget about the importance of a free press. Loaiza made that crystal clear. We need journalists who can do their job without fear, who can ask the tough questions and hold people accountable. It's on us to support that, to be critical thinkers, and to question the narratives we're being fed, especially when they come from people who benefit from the way things are. It's so easy to get caught up in the excitement of it all, the wins, the trophies, these larger-than-life figures, especially in the world of sports. But then you read a book like Loaiza's, and it really makes you think twice. There's always more to the story, right? Stuff we don't see, backroom deals, power plays. It makes you realize that things aren't always what they seem.
It's a good reminder that we can't just sit back and accept things at face value. We have to keep asking those tough questions, even about the people we admire, the institutions we support, because at the end of the day, holding those in power accountable, it benefits all of us.
So where does this deep dive into Florentino Perez leave us? What are the takeaways?
I think Loaiza wants us to see Perez as more than just a guy who runs a football club or a successful businessman. He's a product of a specific system, a system that often rewards a certain kind of ambition, a willingness to do whatever it takes to win. And his story, it's like a case study. It shows us how these larger forces operate, not just in football, but in our own societies, how power is gained, how it's used, and yeah, how it's sometimes abused.
It's about recognizing those patterns, those systems, and deciding what we're okay with, what we're willing to accept as just the way things are. And maybe, if enough of us start asking the tough questions, demanding more transparency, we can start to change those dynamics, make things a little more equitable. Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into the world of Florentino Perez. We just scratched the surface, but hopefully this has given you some things to think about, some new ways of looking at things. If you want to learn more, and I highly recommend you do, you can find a link to Fonsi Loaiza's book, Florentino Pérez, El Poder del Palco, in the show notes. Even if you're not into football, it's a really fascinating read. It'll make you think about power, influence, and the choices people make to get to the top. Until next time, keep asking those questions, keep digging for the truth, and we'll see you on our next deep dive.